In the weeks leading up to the 2024 U.S. presidential election, Donald Trump, the former president, has been intensifying his rhetoric, portraying his political adversaries as dangerous enemies of the state. Trump has even hinted that he might use the military to suppress opposition, a stance that has garnered significant criticism due to its anti-democratic undertones. In various public forums and interviews, he has labeled Democrats and his dissenters as evil and a domestic threat, further contributing to the political divide in the country. It's not surprising that Trump's rhetoric has escalated given the polarization in American politics. The use of such extreme language definitely creates concern, especially when it involves threats of using military force. Whether people agree or disagree with Trump, it's undeniable that his language plays a role in deepening the political divide. And that's something both his supporters and opponents are reacting strongly to. During an interview on Fox News, Trump hinted that the National Guard might be required to deal with the disorder he anticipates on Election Day. This warning reflects his depiction of Democrats as an internal danger. In a Pennsylvania town hall, he took this sentiment even further, accusing Democrats of weaponizing the electoral process in a way that violates America's democratic traditions. These comments align with his past reluctance to commit to a peaceful transition of power, something he emphasized again during an interview at an economic forum in Chicago. It's interesting to note the emphasis Trump is placing on Election Day itself, almost preemptively framing it as a chaotic event. This kind of messaging could set the stage for increased tensions as the day approaches. Accusing political opponents of weaponizing elections raises concerns about how voters may perceive the legitimacy of the democratic process. Trump's ongoing refusal to accept the results of the 2020 election, coupled with his promotion of conspiracy theories around voter fraud and admiration for authoritarian leaders like Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban, has long signaled his willingness to challenge democratic norms. However, his recent suggestions of military action against political opponents represent a marked escalation. No major U.S. presidential candidate in recent history has run on promises of retribution against their opponents, a development that Ian Bassin, a former official in the Obama administration, has called outrageously beyond the pale. The idea of military intervention in domestic politics is deeply unsettling for many Americans, particularly given the country's historical commitment to democracy. It's important to consider how Trump's refusal to accept past election results affects voter confidence and trust in future elections. Trump's harsh messaging is drawing increased scrutiny from his political opponents. Vice President Kamala Harris, running against Trump, has seized upon his remarks to rally support from moderate Republicans and independents who are disturbed by his authoritarian tendencies. At a rally in Erie, Pennsylvania, Harris showcased a video montage of Trump's most inflammatory comments, warning that they indicate his readiness to target anyone who defies him. Her campaign has begun using these videos in advertisements to underscore the potential risks of a second Trump presidency. Kamala Harris' strategy of highlighting Trump's most extreme comments seems designed to tap into the fears many voters have about authoritarianism. The use of campaign ads to showcase Trump's rhetoric could be effective in swaying undecided voters who may be concerned about the erosion of democratic principles. It's interesting to see how Harris is using Trump's own words against him, framing them as a warning to voters about what's at stake in this election. Some individuals who have opposed Trump publicly are already preparing for potential retribution. General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has expressed concerns that he might be recalled to face court-martial if Trump returns to power. Milley has taken personal security precautions, including installing bulletproof glass in his home after receiving threats. Similarly, Olivia Troy, a former Homeland Security advisor under Vice President Mike Pence and a current surrogate for Harris's campaign, has voiced fears for her family's safety and is even contemplating emigration if Trump regains office. The fact that prominent figures are taking security measures in response to Trump's rhetoric highlights how seriously some people are taking these threats. General Milley's concerns about facing legal consequences under a second Trump presidency illustrate the extent to which political dynamics can directly impact the lives of former officials. The theme of revenge has been a persistent element of Trump's political narrative, dating back to his 2016 campaign when he led chants of "lock her up" against Hillary Clinton. Since losing the 2020 election, he has continued to spread false allegations of voter fraud and weave promises of retribution into his campaign. In a speech from March 2023, Trump declared himself not only the voice of his supporters, but also their warrior and their justice, vowing to seek vengeance on their behalf. This rhetoric has only intensified as his legal troubles, including his conviction on 34 felony counts by a New York jury, have become more pronounced. Trump's narrative of being a warrior for his supporters taps into a deep sense of grievance that many of his followers feel, which is a powerful emotional appeal. The recurring theme of revenge and retribution in his campaigns could either mobilize his base or further alienate moderate voters concerned about the country's stability. While some of Trump's advisors would prefer he focus on traditional election issues like the economy and immigration, the former president continues to return to his grievances and threats of political revenge during public appearances. Even in more policy-oriented speeches or town halls, Trump often shifts to accusations against his opponents, portraying President Joe Biden's administration as a threat to democracy. It's clear that Trump's focus on grievances resonates with a certain segment of the electorate, but it may be less appealing to voters interested in hearing more about policy solutions. His frequent pivot to personal and political attacks suggests that grievances and a sense of injustice are central to his current political identity. Trump's remarks have sparked varied reactions among political leaders. For example, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, when asked about Trump's "enemy within" comments, interpreted them as referring to undocumented immigrants rather than political opponents. Youngkin downplayed the concerns that Trump's comments about military action were being misrepresented by the media. Governor Youngkin's interpretation of Trump's comments shows how political figures on the right are sometimes seeking to soften or reframe Trump's more extreme rhetoric. This response reflects the ongoing challenge of navigating Trump's influence within the Republican Party, as not all Republicans are fully aligned with his rhetoric. Media representations of political figures often become a point of contention, as evidenced by Youngkin's suggestion that Trump's words are being misrepresented. Despite the severity of Trump's rhetoric, there is evidence that many voters and officials remain skeptical that he would follow through on these threats. Nonetheless, his increasingly authoritarian tone has raised alarms among those who advocate for democracy, warning that Trump's rhetoric poses a tangible risk to the country's democratic foundations. Some people may dismiss Trump's rhetoric as mere bluster, but for others, the potential for real damage to democratic institutions feels very real. The balance between what's said and what's actually carried out is a key question in political rhetoric. And it seems like that uncertainty is part of what makes Trump's comments so provocative. Trump's latest statements and his ongoing campaign to portray his opponents as existential threats mark a significant departure from traditional U.S. political discourse. His readiness to demonize those who disagree with him and imply military action against them indicates a potential future where long-established democratic norms could be severely weakened. As Election Day approaches, these themes are likely to dominate political conversations, with the stakes for American democracy higher than ever. This kind of departure from traditional political discourse could signal a shift in how elections are contested in the U.S., something that might have long-term implications beyond just this election cycle. It's clear that the stakes in this election are being framed as existential by both sides, which could either energize voter participation or deepen the polarization that already exists. The potential weakening of democratic norms is a sobering thought, and it's something that will likely be a focal point in political discussions as the election draws near.